He was a king, and she was everything to him. In life, she was more than just a queen. She was his soulmate, his mirror, his voice of reason, and sometimes his only reason to rule. Her presence softened his wrath and sharpened his vision. When she smiled, his court rejoiced. When she wept, kingdoms trembled. And when she died, he broke in ways no war had ever managed. This is a real story, one of love, obsession, and what happens when grief consumes the throne. The king's name was Pedro of Castile, but history would remember him not for his battles or conquests, but for what he did after his queen died. Her name was Inês de Castro, a noblewoman from Portugal. She was never meant to be queen. She was a lady-in-waiting, a companion to another princess. Yet, she captured Pedro's heart from the moment he saw her. Theirs was a forbidden romance. Pedro was forced to marry another woman for politics. But his love for Inês never faded. Even after his wife died, he refused to love anyone else. He lived with Inês in open defiance of his father, the King of Castile. And when the old king ordered her death, fearing her influence, Pedro vowed vengeance. She was assassinated, stabbed in the neck as she held her young children. And Pedro, shattered. Most would move on. Kings had duties, wars to fight, succession to ensure. But Pedro did something different, something history would never forget. He retrieved her body. He had her corpse embalmed, dressed in royal robes, crowned her in death as his queen. And then he did the unthinkable. He slept beside her lifeless body for nights, some say weeks. In the dark silence of his chambers, he whispered to a corpse, kissed lips long gone cold, held hands that would never return his grip. The bed that once held love, now held a tomb. This wasn't madness. Not entirely. It was grief. Twisted, pure, unrelenting grief. And the kingdom watched in stunned silence. Who was this man so deeply bound to a dead woman? And how far would he go to prove that love never dies? The queen was gone. As the final rites were whispered, the court grew quiet. A stillness settled over the palace. Not of reverence, but of fear. Not for her, but for him. Kings were supposed to grieve and then rise, to acknowledge death, weep once, and return to governance. But he did not leave her side. The chamber where her body lay was meant to be temporary, a cold, incense-heavy room where the dead were prepared for burial. Yet day after day he refused to move. The servants whispered. He hadn't changed his clothes, hadn't bathed. He refused food unless it was brought beside her. He ate beside her. He wept beside her. At night he slept beside her. The physicians dared to speak. "Your Majesty, this is not the way." But their words slid off him like water on bronze. The king had made his choice. He ordered the chamber sealed. No one was to touch her. The body, already lifeless, began to decay. In secret, the servants rubbed her skin with oils and balms, desperate to mask the truth of time. Flowers were placed around her pillow. Lavender, rose petals soaked in wine. Anything to dull the scent. Still, the smell came. The guards noticed it first. Then the council. But no one dared challenge the man whose sorrow had turned into obsession. The priests warned him. "This is unclean," they said. "Unnatural. The gods do not smile on a king who clings to the dead." He answered with silence. And then one morning he emerged. Pale, sunken, eyes ringed with darkness. The court rushed to meet him, ready to restore order, to crown mourning with recovery. But the king spoke a new decree. "She will not be buried. Not until I say so." He had artisans summoned. Sculptors, embalmers, alchemists. All were ordered to preserve the queen, to halt time. A new chamber was commissioned. One carved from white marble, cooled by underground aqueducts, lined with gold and mirrors. Her bed, no longer of wood, was now of stone. The queen, wrapped in silk, was laid upon it as if still sleeping. Her face was painted to look alive. And he returned to her. It was no longer grief. It was worship. The king's duties began to slip. Letters from foreign courts went unanswered. Tributes from provinces piled up uncounted. The council ruled in his absence, whispering about madness cloaked in love. And yet, some among them pitied him. For once, long ago, the king had been different. A man full of laughter, a ruler adored for his generosity. He had built temples, pardoned prisoners, even walked among the poor. But the queen had changed him. She had softened his anger, filled his hollow court with music and joy. And now that she was gone, he had become a shadow. A king who no longer ruled. A man who no longer lived, only watched, and waited, by her side. They say grief has a voice, a moan, a howl, a cry. But in the palace it was silent. The young king stopped speaking. Not to his advisors, not to the servants, not even to the gods. He sat beside her, just as he had in life, his fingers still resting where her pulse once was. At first, the court whispered that it was a ritual. Perhaps the young king believed his presence could summon her soul back. But as the days passed into weeks, they understood. It wasn't magic. It was madness. He refused to bury her. The queen's body, once surrounded by lavender and oils, began to fade. Though the servants discreetly reapplied perfume and herbs, the truth seeped through. The scent of death could not be covered forever. Yet still he would not leave her side. The imperial bedchamber, once echoing with the sounds of political lovers, with power games and gentle laughter, now became a tomb. Heavy drapes blocked the light. The oil lamps burned at all hours, casting shadows that danced across the marble floor like specters. The queen's body lay still, adorned in the same gown she wore the day she died. Pale, fragile, untouched. The young king sat beside her with black robes, a gold circlet still upon his head, and eyes that never closed. There were attempts, gentle ones, to pull him away. A sister entered with tears, placing her hand on his shoulder. He didn't flinch. A priest read aloud the rites of passing. He kept staring ahead. Finally, the palace physician stepped forward and begged him to consider his own health. "Your Majesty," he whispered, "even the gods do not sleep beside the dead." The young king simply replied, "Then let the gods learn what it means to love." Word spread. The Senate sent a messenger to intervene, but he was turned away. In the taverns they debated. Was this love at its purest, unyielding and eternal? Or was it obsession, the kind that rots reason like worms in fruit? Soon, the palace guards refused to enter the bedchamber. The stench was unbearable, the atmosphere suffocating. Yet still the young king remained. He spoke only to her now, whispered to the air, caressed her cold hand. Every movement slowed, as if he had stepped into a world where time did not matter, only memory. Paintings of the queen were draped in black, her statues hidden. But in the bedroom, her lifeless form remained visible to him, the only truth he could accept. There was no longer a king who ruled, only a man who had once been crowned, and now knelt in shadow. His servants stopped entering the room. They left food outside the door, untouched for days. The palace air, once filled with the music of strings and the echo of heels on marble, grew still, stale. No word came from the emperor. No voice, just silence, sealed behind those golden doors. Inside the chamber, the queen's body lay unchanged. The young king refused embalming. He had demanded only one thing: let her remain with him untouched by ritual or flame. So the room was cooled with ice hauled from the distant north. Incense burned in gold-bowled braziers, lavender and resin thick in the air. But even the sweet smoke could not stop nature. Even a king's grief cannot pause decay. He lay beside her still, arms folded on his chest like hers, crown still crooked, clothes grown loose on his thinning frame. He spoke to her softly, like nothing had changed. He asked her about the garden. He asked her if the clouds outside the window looked like elephants again. And sometimes he laughed. But no one else did. The empire had begun to drift. Governors squabbled over grain. Legions moved without orders. The Senate whispered. Coins minted with his face still circulated, but fewer each month. The state was becoming a ghost, just like its ruler. In the city below, the people began to murmur. Some said he had gone mad. Others said this was love in its purest form, too pure for a world like this. The high priests pleaded with him to hold a funeral, to grant her soul safe passage. But he would not open the doors. "She is not gone," he whispered through the crack. "She is with me." And still he lay beside her. Day became night, then day again. The queen, once revered by millions, now lay fading before the only man who could not bear to let her go. The silence was no longer mourning. It was obsession. It was dissent. And the world beyond that room began to forget the boy once crowned in gold and lilies. The young king lived in his own tomb, one carved not of stone, but of memory and grief. And grief, when fed by power, does not fade.